Bartenders, when were you too late to stop someone from drinking? A regular customer came in celebrating his 6-month sobriety chip, ordered a Coke, then quietly switched to whiskey shots when I stepped away to help another customer. And by the time I noticed, he'd already thrown away 6 months of recovery in 20 minutes. This happened at Murphy's Pub downtown where I'd been bartending for 3 years. We had a lot of regulars, but Mike was special. He'd been coming in for coffee and Coke during the day since getting sober. Mike was a construction worker in his 40s who'd lost his family, his house, and nearly his job to alcoholism before getting clean through AA. He'd been sober for exactly 6 months and came in that Tuesday afternoon to show me his sobriety chip. He was so proud, talking about how he'd made it through the holidays without drinking. "Just a Coke today? Like always," he said, sliding onto his usual bar stool and setting the chip on the bar counter. I poured his Coke and went to help a group of college students who'd just walked in. They were loud and wanted complicated cocktails that took me about 15 minutes to make. When I looked back at Mike, he was still sitting in the same spot, but something felt different. His posture had changed, and he was staring down at his drink with this defeated expression. I walked over and realized his Coke glass was still full, but there were 3 empty shot glasses next to it that hadn't been there before. "Mike, what are those?" I asked, though I already knew the answer, and felt my heart sink. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes and his hands shaking. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I ordered them while you were busy. I couldn't stop myself." I immediately cut him off and refused to serve him any more alcohol, but the damage was already done. Mike had broken his sobriety in the time it took me to make a few drinks. "I got a call from my ex-wife," he explained, his voice breaking. "She's moving across the country with my kids next month. I'll never see them again." Mike started crying and talking about how he'd been fighting so hard to stay sober so he could prove he deserved to see his children again someday. "What's the point now?" he said, slumping over the bar. "If they're gone anyway, why stay sober? I've already lost everything that mattered to me." I tried to convince Mike that 6 months wasn't gone forever, that he could start over tomorrow, that his recovery still had value even if he'd slipped up, but he was spiraling into despair and wouldn't listen to anything I said about getting back on track with his sponsor or going to a meeting that night. He left the bar after I refused to serve him more, but I knew he'd just go somewhere else to continue drinking where nobody knew his story. I found out later that Mike went to 3 more bars that night and drank until he blacked out in his truck in the parking lot of the last place. 2 days later, Mike's sponsor called to tell me that Mike had been fired from his construction job for showing up drunk and had stopped answering his phone completely. The sponsor was worried because Mike had missed several AA meetings and wasn't responding to calls from anyone in his support network. I never saw Mike again after that day. His sponsor said he'd moved out of his apartment and nobody knew where he'd gone or if he was even still in the city. Sometimes I think about those 20 minutes when I was making cocktails for college kids while Mike was throwing away his sobriety 3 feet away from me. The worst part is knowing that if I'd just stayed at his end of the bar, maybe I could have talked him through whatever news he'd received about his kids. Sometimes the difference between saving someone and losing them forever is just 20 minutes of not paying attention when they needed someone most.